Fair enough, Gilly. All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, FCM community. This is Mike and Mike in the evening, here to bring you your preseason 2105 podcast. We are going to keep this light, going to keep this brief, just kind of get to the nuts and the bolts of it. I'm not going to do too much extra tonight for various reasons. One of which being the fact that my computer hates me, and I'm doing this through Discord on my phone in a very weird fashion. And the second part of which is like, it's Friday night. I'd rather fall asleep on my couch in an hour watching some TV, which is what I plan on doing. We will get right into it. And again, as always, we start in the American League East. I do apologize. I'm going to give you one moment. I'm going to make sure that I have the opening day file up and not the Sim1 file. I don't want to give anything away. Not that you all haven't seen the file, but that's not the point. So we will start in the American League East, where it looks to be about much of the same as it was last year, which is Boston and Montreal kind of vying for that top spot. Who's going to get it, who's going to come out on top. My guess is it's going to come down to the wire. Honestly, Gilly has put together quite a nice team out there in the American League East, and they're quite a good team. They've got a lot of good bats. The thing that I think that really keeps them back is the pitching. I am not overly sold on the rotation out there in Montreal. A couple good arms, but I just don't think there's enough good arms, and there's really nothing down in the minors to really fill that in. But I think what really sets them apart is that hitting. They have Bob the Builder Downs, Elliot Fat Fingers Alarexki, just a couple really good bats in the middle of that lineup. A couple other bats around them still too. That's not too bad. Ian Varney still out there, had a pretty solid year. Tough gun to the top with a little bit of speed. So Montreal's got a good team, but Boston is really a team that a couple years off World Series run, and honestly doing nothing but getting better. With Charles Miller out there and the traded for Josh Cooper, Fred Sloan, Jake Grayshall. A lot of good players out there. Kevin Dorn, a guy that most people probably would not expect a whole lot from, um, pitching quite well and doing so in the playoffs where it matters the most. Really, when it comes down to it, for me in the East, it comes down to Boston and Montreal duking it out. Who takes it this year? I honestly put it as a toss up. I think both teams make the playoffs. I think it's really a toss up for who wins that division. And it might come down to which team can add the next piece. I think both teams' problems are their rotations. I don't think either of their rotations are overly strong. I think Boston's is getting better just because they have young guys coming up. I mean, Kurt Anderson looks like he's really starting to make a play for having a good year this year. Hopefully, Adam Marion's only 26. Again, another younger arm out there. Jeff Marbini, pitched a little bit last year. Looked like for a first full season. Not sure how well he's going to fare, but still, and other young arms as well in the rotation. The minors coming up. Gilly will quickly point out this is the same rotation and the same exact team that won him 100 games last year. And yes, Gilly had a very good year last year up until the point where he got into the playoffs. Then things went a little south. Um, can they go to back to playoffs? I expect Montreal to go back to the playoffs. I expect Boston to be in the playoffs too. It's just kind of a matter who goes first and who goes second. Gilly is going to point out that he went to the World Series last year, to which we should probably point out that he didn't win the World Series last year. But that's unfair. He made it farther than any other AL team did last year. So we can give him that much. But it'll be Boston and Montreal out there in the American League East. New York's rebuilding. I mean, I wouldn't expect too much out of New York. They still got a couple decent players on the offensive side that are available for trade for those looking to add, which there's very few of you actually out there looking to add. Um, I wouldn't expect too much out of Montreal or Toronto, who's clearly in a deep rebuild. Got a couple of young bats out there in Toronto, a couple of pitchers that are all pretty terrible, so I wouldn't expect much out of them either. Baltimore, probably by default, the third best team in that division, just because they got a couple of young bats too. Thomas Herrera is available out there for a late first, a big contact lefty bat with limited power, good eye. Pretty nice bat to add to your lineup if you're able to, and they have some decent pitching. Honestly, it's a three-team just mix of who finishes third by default and who finishes fourth and fifth. in that division. But Boston, Montreal are the top two teams clearly in that division. So, Mike, what do you have in the AL East?
So this is going to be a little boring. I see things the same way you do. I think it's pretty obvious when you look at the teams that Montreal and Boston are easily head and shoulders above the rest. You have three teams that are trying to rebuild. Baltimore seems to win just to spite PR. Um, I don't know that there's anyone in this league that's going to give him a first for Herrera, but kudos for trying. Um, to me, Boston and Montreal comes down to who can add that piece. Like you said, Montreal's pitching isn't great. It's not going to blow you away, but his stadium is tailored for his offense. Those two may also come down to who gets hit with the big injury or who has frequent injuries. That's going to kind of separate who takes the division. I tend to lean towards Fred and the Red Sox just because he has a little more depth in his minors. He has some pieces that he could move if he wants to, although we all know Fred doesn't trade very much. So I guess it will depend on if Fred feels like making a move using his picks, which he still has for this year, and he'll have his other picks on pick Sim 5 and a couple of his players in his minors to make a move, maybe add a pitcher or something. Spitballing, maybe Doug decides to move Scheffler. Again, I don't know that Fred has enough to get someone like Scheffler, but putting someone like that at the top of Boston's rotation probably puts them over the top. Gilly will have to wait because I have most of his picks, and his minors are pretty barren. So maybe after Sim 5, Gilly can find a starter to throw in there. Woods seems to still be holding up fairly well, although I am on Sim 1, so I do have the file in front of me. He didn't have a great Sim 1, and he is starting the decline, but Woods is still a pretty good closer in this file. And some of Gill's pitchers did fare fairly well in Sim 1, but we know that his whole team is really focused around that offense. So scoring 54 runs after Sim 1 is not usual for Montreal, so maybe they explode here with offensive onslaught, but I tend to lean towards Fred only because I think he has a better ability to add people. But again, Fred doesn't trade. To me, I agree with you. Baltimore finishes third. Toronto, New York. It's a toss up. It's kind of trying to pick which is the shinier turd. I think they just you can flip flop them for fourth or fifth. Rocky and Hokie both rebuild a certain way, especially Hoke. But they both are good drafters, so it wouldn't surprise me in a couple of years if those two teams kind of take over the division and make a run for it. But I think I would go Boston, Montreal, Baltimore, New York, Toronto. If I had to pick who's going to finish in what slot.
Yeah, and I think that's probably a pretty good call there too, because you're right. Definitely, who's going to add the most? Yes, more than likely, Gilly will spend all of his draft capital, Sim 5 as soon as he possibly can, to try to get something extra. Fred, you're right, not as prone to training, but he definitely has more things to move now and at the Sim 5. So very curious to see how this goes out there in the East this year. Moving on to the Central. Central is another division in the American League. No, I mean Central. It looks to be about the same as it was last year. Detroit and Kansas City duking it out for that top slot, and then who kind of falls into third, fourth, and fifth. I mean, fifth is clearly going to be Minnesota. Unless Minnesota does something horrifically wrong, they should easily finish in the bottom of that division. They do have some good young players. So if they accidentally start playing them, then be trouble. But I don't think so. I think Bolton knows what he's doing out there. Got more top picks out of it and turning things around. And to be fair to him, I feel like he did a real good job with almost nothing last year on getting some actual pieces out there that have a little bit of significance to them. So I think he's done. I'm sorry, I leaned back from my mic there. Probably didn't help. A nice job out there, but he should finish fifth. Next, it's going to be a toss up. Is it going to be, Chicago or Cleveland finishing fourth and third? I think Cleveland's got more or less the same team still, but a new GM out there with Dan. Can you guys still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. I just my phone like went off the Discord, but I wanted to, and said that my mic's still on, but I wanted to make sure. So, Dan is the new GM out there in Cleveland. He really hasn't signaled much of a direction, one way or the other. So we will see what happens with that. And Chicago, for as much as they want to rebuild, has just too many good pieces still on that team. to really focus on a pure or true rebuild yet. They still have a lot of good bats in that lineup that once a couple of them get traded, if a couple of them do get traded, will definitely signal a downward trend. But I think the Chicago probably finishes third with Cleveland. I bet Dan could trade a couple of those pieces, especially at the deadline, especially after people decide if they want to go for it or not, and probably finish fourth. So I'm guessing Chicago third, Cleveland fourth, Minnesota fifth. And then KC, I just really like that KC team. I mean, this is a team that G-Money's been building for a while. It should be basically built at this point. He's another one that would love to add some stuff, but doesn't have a lot of pieces to add at the moment. But I still think that he could probably win that division. Detroit's a good team. I mean, Eric up there done a nice job of kind of turning that around a little bit, and a little more youth in there, shedding some of that just horrendous salary that was out there. So I like it's gonna be a dogfight. It really will. Detroit and Kansas City are gonna go back and forth, but I think Kansas City takes it with Detroit finishing second, and fighting for that wild card spot this year. So what do you think, Mike? This is your division.
Yeah. So again, clear two teams head and shoulders above the rest. I think myself and the team formerly known as the Fighting Maddies are kind of stuck in that middle ground. Minnesota clearly in a rebuild. Mass left them in a very bad spot when he left. Pulte has done an admirable job of trying to add some talent. We all know. I think it's Jorge Rivera looks like a stud, contact speed guy. You wish his OPS was a little higher, but he does a lot of good things with the bat, especially in a league that likes to focus on speed, to the mash and dash. He's got a couple other nice bats. And I know he's trying to make moves to add a few more assets, but I think I agree. He finishes fifth. I would put my team in fourth. Um, we're kind of trying to bridge the gap between being not terrible and also adding to the farm. But if the right deal rolls around, I'll definitely move pieces. I would have no problem trading someone if I found a deal that I liked. But I think the name of the game is trying to move into that Ms. Land, GB Land, Peter Land, where you compete every year. So trying to bridge the gap between being just absolutely atrocious and also adding pieces to the farm and continuing to move people into the rotation and lineup, when they're ready. So I'll put Dan in Cleveland in third. I know him and Maddie kind of exchange the pieces that they like, so his team is kind of a hybrid between the Indians and Angels. The Angels weren't real good out in Los Angeles, and Maddie kind of traded away the big bats from Cleveland, so he's kind of in that middle ground as well, where he's going to have to decide whether he wants to push, which may not be the best idea with with Detroit and Kansas City being as powerful as they are, or just completely ripping it down to the studs, and starting over. So it'll be interesting to see what Dan does as we welcome him to the bloodbath that is the AL Central. I tend to like Kansas City's team a little better than Detroit's. Detroit lost Bruzurgis in the offseason to GB. He returned home to his papa in Pittsburgh. But man, that lineup is stacked. Yoshimura, Varian, center at the top, Hagen, Krasny, Nickel hitting for the power. And then they still do have a decent rotation. But I think G Money and the Royals can match him lineup wise, and I like the pitching a little better in Kansas City, although he is a little lefty centric. He has a lot of lefties in his pen and rotation. I do like the Royals a little better. I think Kansas City finishes first, Detroit second, but I do think Detroit gets a wild card. Back to the East, I do think Montreal also gets a wild card. Those are my two wild card teams. But I think Kansas City takes the Central with Detroit finishing second.
Yeah, so we're about the same on that one again. So moving on to the AL West. AL West looking a little bit different this year. Houston has finally decided to kind of rear its head and give it a go after near 2 decades of not doing so. So definitely a different dynamic in the AL West. Obviously, we have a new GM out there. Matty's come over to take over the Angels, who will finish in fourth as they have been or worse for the last couple of years. So, I mean, I don't really expect anything really different out there. And slight exaggeration. I wouldn't say a drama queen, TT, but near enough. So I don't expect much out of the Angels this year. Matty's definitely already put out there that he's selling. I mean, he is a young catcher for a late first. That I'm shocked that nobody has gone after yet, and that is Aaron Jordan, 27-year-old young catcher, for a late first out there. And Texas is one of those interesting teams. Last year they made a little bit of a run, didn't really do much. A couple years ago, they did a bit of a run, didn't do much. But they have signaled that they are rebuilding again. I fear there might have been a bit of a Mass factor out there last year, where Mass comes in and does that thing where he trades all of his prospects and all of his picks to make a run, and realizes late in the season that it was not a good idea and definitely not the time to do so. So I'm expecting Texas to do that rebuild thing. They have a lot of good pieces out there for trade if people do go and knocking. So I think if Texas finishes fifth, LA finishes fourth. I'd say Oakland finishes third. Oakland did go out and get a couple of younger pitchers in Berryman and Musiano this offseason to kind of fill out that rotation. And so they did a little bit of something there. They did a little bit in free agency, like they normally do. Still got some good picks left, still got some stuff left. But, for all that Doug does add, all the little pieces he tries here and there, it doesn't ever seem to quite work out for him. So I think it'll be third for him. And then Seattle, I think, finally gets dethroned this year and finishes in second place. Seattle has some young prospects, has plenty of draft picks to trade to kind of add where they could add. Whether they do it or not, it really depends. But I think this is Houston's year. I think Houston finally decided to show up and take down the king. And I think this is the year that they do it. I think it's kind of, last year was a close one. It was a bit of a tease for Houston, and they kind of fell off the last series of the season to just barely miss out on the division. I think this year they clearly haven't. They've spent a lot of time and a lot of resources drafting and trading for very particular players, including an ex-Seattle farmhand, Tim Wiedenmeyer, who should pitch quite well out there in Houston with that defense that Houston went out. People were probably sleeping on some of these deals that they made, but they traded first-round picks for Ian Mendez and Louis Millet, back-to-back years. These young guys, these light-hitting, slick-fielding, speedy shortstop types. And now he's put them in the middle of the rotation. The middle of the infield, excuse me. And he had been drafting ground ball pitchers for years, and now some of them are actually maturing to a point to play. Houston seems like the odds-on favorite to take the West this year. Seattle will probably give them a run. Seattle always tries to do that. But it looks to be a bit of a gap year, a bit of a bridge year for Seattle, as they just they got a really good rotation. They got some good bats. The defense is okay, but I just don't know if they'll be able to beat off the Houston onslaught with a big enough stick this year. But it will be interesting. I think the AL West, for the first time in a while, will be a fun division to watch. There's a couple decent teams out there, if not good teams out there. Should be intriguing, but I think you might have already hit the nail on the head and kind of buried the lead a little bit. Not sure. Atlanta, the AL West gets more than one playoff team. I think that the one playoff team that comes out of the West will be the division winner. I'm not sure if either of those other two teams were strong enough to fend off a Boston or to fend off a Detroit / Kansas City for that second wild card spot. So I'm thinking the the West is back to one playoff team, kind of as it has been for a while, but a little bit different look this year, but probably the same result, which is the one playoff team.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think the three divisions in the AL, you kind of have two clear top dogs, and then you have three teams that are kind of meh. Same for the West. I think Los Angeles actually finishes fifth. I think Mass and War Priest hold out, trying to get back some of the things that they traded for their pieces, which allows them to win a few more games than they probably want to. Because, yes, I agree with you. They definitely sold the lot for last season, and now they're kind of stuck with nothing. And they have to hope to get as much value out of some of the players that they have. I mean, they have nice players. I'll pimp Ben Cool, who is a former Chicago White Sox. But realistically, I don't know if they're going to get what they paid for some of the items, and that may put them into quite a long rebuild. So it'll be interesting to see what Texas does, how quickly they sell some of those pieces. But I think Maddie in Los Angeles finished fifth. Texas finishes fourth. Doug, bless his heart, he tries to make moves, but he just doesn't seem to make big enough moves to kind of announce his authority out west. He's got Scheffler, he's got some okay bats, but he just doesn't have enough to compete with the Seattles and the Houstons of the world. Berryman appears like he's going to be absolutely terrible in Oakland, like he's going to get shelled. It was Andy's fear of Berryman all along, and he did okay in Seattle, and then Miz shipped him out, and now I feel like he's going to just get shelled in Oakland. So Oakland will probably finish third, but only because Texas and Los Angeles are kind of in rebuild, tear it down mode. Again, Seattle, I think, does get dethroned. I know I said Kansas, Detroit, and Montreal were going to win the wild cards. Here's the interesting piece. I think the other teams are bad enough that maybe Seattle does grab that second wild card. And if anything, I'd say it might be over Detroit, only because Cleveland and Chicago are better than what is out west. I think Houston is far and away the best team out west. Miz is kind of in a slow transition period, but Miz's pitching staff is phenomenal. It will depend how TT's young pitchers kind of perform. Basham didn't come out of the gate real well, but he looks like a stud. And then Wiedmeyer, who I dealt to him, is a ground ball monster. Hinkle, Larson, Turrison. Turrison's also a ground ball monster. So they really have that team set up to succeed. They got some mashers. I know we all kind of scoffed when they traded for Kent, a whole draft class, which was in the top. Was it top 10, Miz? Top 5? I mean, they traded
It was
high.
it was top 5. I want to say it was fourth overall.
We all were like,
it
oh
might
my
have been
gosh.
6th, but I'm pretty sure it was 4th.
Okay, we all were like, oh my gosh. We look at Kent now, and oof, I mean, he looks like a DH monster who's just gonna pummel baseballs for the next decade in Houston as long as he holds where he is. Him and Corson, I mean, that's a middle of the order that's formidable. Those are really, I mean, they have some nice other bats, but like you said, some of their guys are more defensive centric than offensive, like Mellet. I know you said Melee. I pronounce it Mellet. Mendez, they do enough with the bat, but they're more defensive centric. But those two big bats in the middle are really going to carry that lineup. Now, if he was to catch an injury, or Houston was to catch an injury, that may change the fortunes, and maybe Miz takes another title out west. But I think I tend to agree. I think Houston ends the Miz reign of terror. I do appreciate your selling of the nice things that Seattle has out west. I was going to cue Maddie for the used car salesman Miz gif, but he's not in the chat. So yeah, I think Houston, then Seattle, then I have Oakland, then Texas, and then Los Angeles. I know I buried the lead and said my wild card teams. I'm probably gonna go back a little bit, and I will say Montreal and Seattle in a friend v friend wild card battle are my two wild card teams.
Now that would be an interesting wild card to see if my pitching can outduel his hitting, much like my hitting outdueled his hitting the first sim. But that would be interesting. So again, I sadly think that unless I make some massive moves, which I'm not sure I'm capable of doing, I see Boston and Montreal, Detroit and Kansas City, then Houston. So I have Detroit versus Montreal in that wild card match. I think Montreal will get through Detroit to go on to face Kansas City. And Kansas City is literally the antithesis of the Gilly team. So I think that Kansas City would beat Montreal in that case. I think Boston would face off against Houston. Boston would beat Houston just based on the fact that they've been there and done that recently. Then Kansas City would take down Boston to go on to the World Series to face our NL components. So who we will slide right into and talk about right now. So in the NL East, regardless of what Sim 1 says, I think that is Peter's division to lose. And were Peter to lose that division, then he really should just hang up his cleats and move to a different city, because when you look at that rotation, that is a rotation that should win every game, all the games. And if it doesn't, then somebody's done something terribly wrong. This is a rotation that's just Lee Laughlin, the trade rape of the century, sitting on top of that rotation. And then after that, you follow up with Willie Ochoa, Christian Atkinson, Jim Zinowski, which I enunciated wrong and don't care. An old guy that got traded around a whole bunch. I remember you and I even talked about him at one point, and you weren't so hot on him. You didn't think he was going to turn out, and I'm pretty sure he turned out almost exactly like I said he was going to. Alas, out in Washington instead. And then they've got Esteban filling out the back end of that rotation. I mean, they just got a really good rotation and a really good bullpen. I mean, I'm always I think this is just what Peter does. Peter takes just the best player available in the first round. Then rounds 2 for 4, he takes every bullpen arm that he could possibly find. And then rounds 5 and 6, he just takes the best looking hitter that meets his standard that he'll then try to trade you 3 years later as the greatest prospect ever. So he has a very specific draft strategy, and it's allowed him to put very competitive teams on the field. That and some timely trading, we'll call it. But again, good rotation. I like his lineup. I find it hard to believe Washington doesn't run away with the division once again. Florida has issued a statement that they are going to be selling, so that'll be interesting. Another seller enters the market, which is already full of sellers. So even the buyers are sellers in this current trade market. So be very interesting to see kind of where that takes us down the rabbit hole. Somebody was mentioning in chat earlier that Dave in Philadelphia is a bat or two away, and I thought of that. And I went, I'm like, oh, let me go look. And they're not wrong. I mean, Philadelphia has again. We'll call it the NL East type rotation. He's got a couple of really good guys out there, then a couple of guys that he's brought in on trades that are quite good. Brian Rathburn, Patrick Jr. It's just he's got a very good rotation. He's got a solid bullpen, which is something that plagued Dave for a long time. It is the lineup that is just lacking, to say the least. He's got that one bat up top. Then he's got that third baseman, Zach Bleak, who's actually a DH, it looks like, should be coming around, but that's it. You look at his minors, and his minors are bare on the bat side. And he's got a couple of arms coming up, but none of them are necessarily the arms that you build rotations around. So a little bit light on the prospect side, still has his picks to my knowledge, so he could go out and add. But let's be fair, he would need to add 2 or 3 bats. I don't think he has quite the ability or the ammo to do that. So he'll be a guy that finishes probably 3rd in the division, just because he's got a good rotation and nothing much else. Very interesting to see which way Dave goes. I mean, honestly, the best thing for him to do would probably try to sell all those pieces, all those arms and stuff, load up on draft picks, load up on prospects, and just do the rebuild thing, because otherwise he's almost there, but he just doesn't have enough in the cupboard, I think, to make it across. So Atlanta is clearly in a rebuild. They have traded everything but Warren Hyde, who will never leave, no matter who you are, no matter what you offer, because he's Warren and Hyde. So and Stang's not wrong on that. Hyde's a hell of a player. So I still think Atlanta probably finishes the bottom of that division. After that, Philadelphia, after Florida. I think if Florida does sell, Florida has some nice pieces. High Heat's not going to wait around. If people come with good prices, he'll move them. So I think Florida finishes 4th. I think Philadelphia finishes 3rd. And I think New York, the up-and-coming team in that East, takes 2nd this year. I don't think this is quite New York's year just yet. And I dare say that if I said something like Peter better watch his back because here he comes, then Peter's going to get on the chat and be all St. Louis-y. But he better watch his back. I mean, you look at Ross Diller, you look at Tyler Kendall, Friedman, all these guys that Decker's been out there kind of picking up year after year in the top of the draft. On the pitching side, just waiting for them to come of age. And when they do, he should have a pretty solid rotation. The flip over to the offensive side, Brian Fulmer. Here he is, just about ready. Didn't quite get as much speed as you would hope off of him, but still a pretty good player out there. Piero Mastu, another speedy guy at shortstop that's just the guy that everybody kind of wants to have out there. And then he's got other guys further down in the minors that are getting closer and closer to coming up. I think that this is the team to start to watch soon. I don't think this is their year just yet, but I think that they're definitely trending upwards and trending upwards at a pretty good clip. So in the East, I'm taking Washington, then New York, then Philly, then Florida and Atlanta to kind of round out that.
Yeah, so I'm going to echo that. Washington should win this division going away. With that rotation and that lineup, there's really no one that even comes close to them out east. In my opinion, I think Florida does rebound. It really will depend on what he does. I think if he holds or if he takes some of his pieces from Hokie and adds a few things, he could possibly push for a wild card position. But he has signaled that he wants to rebuild. So it'll be interesting to see what he does. Obviously, he had a rough Sim 1. So we'll see. If he does sell off, then I think Philadelphia probably finishes second. If he doesn't, then I think he has an opportunity to finish second. New York is the sleeping giant here. I will say this. I think Peter should probably get a ring in the next couple of years because when New York is ready, I think that team is going to be a juggernaut. They got the speed. They could probably use a couple, power bats. It'll depend on how guys progress. I know he just acquired Silverstein for his whole draft class, so I'll be interested to see how Silverstein turns out. I tend to agree with you though, Miz. Dave's team in Philadelphia is missing something. They really have nothing on the hitting side as far as specs to fill some of those open positions. And on the pitching side, they got a nice 5-man rotation. Staines kind of looked like he was going to be a top-notch closer, and he kind of just finished in the middle, 84 peak. The vitals are okay. So I'd be interested to see how long he actually sticks there. But yeah, I agree. If he has Junior Patrick, if he put Junior Patrick up on the trade block, he's going to get a ton for him, which is far more than he paid for Junior Patrick. So that would be a net positive.
I was going to say the fair thing would be get what he paid for, which was a bunch of late picks and a first base prospect that nobody wanted or ever will.
So yeah, we'll invite Brez back just to trade Junior Patrick from Philadelphia, so that Dave gets exactly what he paid. But yeah, I mean, Lee Laughlin is, if not the best, in the conversation for the best pitcher in the file. I think it's easy to say he's the best pitcher in the file. And for whatever reason, Washington just doesn't seem to close the deal, right? I mean, last playoffs, I thought they were far and away the favorite, and J-Main and Milwaukee came out of the Central to take it. It ended up being J-Main versus GD, sorry, in the NLCS. So this should be Peter's year again. He should win the division. So I guess I would go Peter. I'm going to say high heat because I don't think he's going to find what he wants, and his team may turn it around. Then Dave Decker, only because I think he's going to hold back his guys and not unleash them too early. And then Stang. I think Stang finishes 5th. But again, we all know this is Stang's way of getting back into contention. It's what he does. He's great at it. We've all seen him come from the ashes, rise like the Phoenix, and be a juggernaut out east. So I think it goes Peter, high heat, Dave, Decker, Stang.
Yeah, no, it makes sense to me. You almost have to wonder at some point, does if this continues, does Lee Laughlin become the Dan Marino of FCM? So it'll be an interesting kind of thing to watch. But moving on to the NL Central, another one. It almost feels like every division we've talked about so far, there's 2 teams and then everybody else. The NL East a little bit different. There's kind of one team and then everybody else maybe. But I think the NL Centrals is the 2 teams and then everybody else thing once again. I mean, you're looking at St. Louis and Milwaukee, and then everybody just kind of fiddling around after that. I'll start at the bottoms because for some reason I've been doing that this pod. But Pittsburgh's the bottom team in the division. Nothing against GB or what he's trying to do out there, but I mean he's doing what he needs to do. He's keeping his young talent
in the cupboard, picking up some older guys, even if other teams have to pay for him to take them. And he's going to run with it, and that's fine. He's doing exactly what he needs to be doing. The thing is that cupboard is far from bare. You got Leventhal down there, Fernandez, and Whistle. Like, there's a lot of pitchers on his side that I really liked in the drafts recently, or just in general. There's a couple year or two away. Same on the hitting side. Holstetter, the first baseman, talent, the catcher. He's got some dudes. Sycophus, the third baseman. God, I really want him. He's got some dudes over there that are going to be quite good. It's going to be a quick turnaround out there in Pittsburgh. I don't think people realize that, but some of the talent that Jermaine had already got there, and that since GB has added to, that's going to be a dangerous team. That's going to be a team that makes Pittsburgh a team again. It's going to be exciting in a couple of years. As a real life Pirate fan, I'm really happy to see what's going on out there with Pittsburgh. Not to take away with the teams that are, going to be winning this year. So they finished maybe last in the division this year, which is probably where they need to keep adding a couple more pieces that they need to just make that a killer Pirate team. I think Cincinnati finishes fourth. Cincinnati has another team. Theo said he's going to rebuild. He wants to sell some of his pieces. From what I understand, I think some people that have checked in, the prices have been a little bit higher than they had hoped for, and therefore nothing's quite happened yet. But he's got some really nice pieces out there. Donnie Sism, another ex-Mariner. I mean, he would be a great get for somebody that needs second, third, the second baseman, third baseman type with good defense and he's solid bat. Brian Cosby, good God, does he just have a nice bat? Like, I watch him and I think, man, the fact that nobody's grabbed him up yet is a little bit surprising. He's a catcher. Sure, he doesn't have the greatest arm, but I think the bat definitely makes up for it. Toby's in Denver looks like he went back in free agency because I'm pretty sure he went to free agency and they got released back. And that guy's just a big power bat. Yeah, he's 34. He was a type B. He hits almost 30 home runs a year. That should have been worth something for somebody to pick up. But again, I think that gets into the fact that there's not a lot of competition out there. The rotation's a little bit weak. And he doesn't have a lot in the minors. Minus one or two really nice pieces. So I think that if Cincinnati does indeed trade off some of those pieces and get what he wants for them, which is always the key in any trade situation, probably finishes fourth. Chicago went out and added Hall of Fame to be Donald Nichols. And they have another up-and-coming team. You talk about the Mets being an up-and-coming team. Chicago is another team that people are going to need to watch their backs on pretty soon here. Thomas Cepena is ready. They have Sosa. They have Nichols they added. Ricky Wilson's still pretty good out there. Jeff Harvin, Brian Morant, another guy that's been in and out of Seattle a couple times that I'm quite a big fan of personally. I think he's quite a good hitter. And they have other young bats just kind of sitting in the minors. A couple of things away. When Kelly Garrison gets ready, I mean, he theoretically could play right now the way his vitals look. I mean, Chicago's going to be a team. They got those ground ball pitchers. Once they put the finishing touches on there, which they started to do this year, I'd watch out for them. Probably not this year going to be their year. This year, I think they flirt with 500 and easily finish third in that division. But I would not be surprised if next year or the year after they're pushing. I think it comes again, Milwaukee and St. Louis being the top two teams in this division. I love that St. Louis just sits there, does basically nothing but draft and pick up a couple guys here or there, let a couple guys get free agency there. And regardless of what Peter says, I like what he does out there. I think that he'll finish second, though. I really like what St. Louis is, what they did, how well they did last year. I think they finished second. I was giving Jermaine shit the other day in chat for no apparent reason. I think that what the moves they made in free agency, because I don't pay attention to free agency. I don't bid on free agents. I let some of them go and see if they actually go or if they stay. But adding Brant Wright, Montreal's letting him go and Milwaukee scooping him up. Same with Ben Logan. I'm a big fan of Ben Logan. I know everybody doesn't like a guy that has a just under 4 career ERA, but I really dig Ben Logan. I think he's a very good pitcher in the right park. He was a good fit in Seattle. He'll be a great fit in Milwaukee. Milwaukee and Seattle have similar enough parks that he should do really, really well. And as Jermaine said in chat, Ben Logan belongs in Milwaukee. I think Ben Logan really found a home outside of LA in Seattle. I think he's finding a second home very quickly and very easily in Milwaukee. Mind you, I have not looked to see what his actually stats were that first sim, and I really don't care. It's funny. You take out the LA years for Ben Logan, and Ben Logan's a low 3 to mid 3 ERA kind of guy. So it really, he needs to be in the right park. Seattle's the right park. Milwaukee's the right park for Ben Logan. So I really like the Brewers lineup. I mean, this is a team that won the World Series and added some good pieces to that team. So I think Milwaukee takes the division. I think Seattle nips at their heels and makes an easy wild card. But I think it's Milwaukee's division to lose.
Yeah, I'll agree with you, except for the fact that Seattle plays out west. So I'll correct you. It was St. Louis that you were speaking about.
It's late.
I think Milwaukee probably has the best bullpen in the league. Mullock is a monster. Jason Wilson now is ready, who they acquired from Seattle. And then you still have McNeese out there. I mean, that's just the top three that not many teams can mess with when it comes to the pen. And yeah, I mean, adding Wright and Logan to Verp and Tanaka just further strengthens their rotation. I think far and away the Brewers are the best team out there. GD St. Louis teams tend to go through this ebb and flow where one year they'll compete and the next year they completely shit the bed. So it would not surprise me if St. Louis struggled. Their team, if you look up and down it, they shouldn't struggle, but for whatever reason, Seattle tends to go through these seasons where they look like they're the clear favorite and then they just don't produce. So I'll be interested to see how that goes. GD doesn't do much trading, but good God, he seems to just draft guys, plug them in, and then let other guys walk. I know Gilly's in a tight spot when it comes to money with a $24 million projected loss, but adding somebody like Brant Wright or Logan to that Montreal team probably would have been a nice move. If he could have moved one of his other high salary guys, I know he's paying Woods, his closer, about $17 million, but if Montreal could have added somebody like Brant Wright on a 2-year deal or Ben Logan, that really could have been the thing that kind of took Montreal to that next level and made them the clear favorite in the AL. I love J-Main's moves adding to a team that just won the World Series. I think Milwaukee finishes first. I'm going to go a little bit off the grid and say I think Chicago finishes second. I think GD's team struggles and finishes third. I don't know. St. Louis sometimes just struggles. I really like Jason's team. A lot of what he does will depend on if his pitching staff can stay healthy. Grinley really has low health. He looks like a really good pitcher at 85 overall with 90-90 and high ground balls. It'll just depend on if he can stay healthy, how many starts he's going to get out of him, because he doesn't have a lot of depth. He doesn't really have anyone who's going to be able to step in for Grinley if he gets injured for a long period of time. Sindor, Curley, McMillan. I mean, you can call that the I'm going to have to look up his name, what that third baseman was. Wilkins. So you could call it the Wilkins trade, right? All of Chicago's rotation are pretty much from the Wilkins trade with Hokie. Literally, Grinley, McMillan, Curley, that's all from that trade. Jason's team does mirror my White Sox team a little bit. I don't know that the offense is quite where my offense was, but his bullpen is just as bad as mine was during my run. His offense might be just as good, though, now that we put Nichols in there. I'm not a huge fan of Harvin. He seems to be kind of a middle-of-the-road bat. He doesn't do anything real well. Kind of the same with Morant. But I do like his lineup. Sapina is fantastic. Sousa's a good bat at catcher. Nichols does hit for power. Wilson, who I drafted, I thought was going to hit, a bunch of bombs. He just doesn't seem to hit as many as you think that he would. But with Garrison coming up, I really like Chicago's offense. It's that bullpen where he's lacking. But Jason might be able to make a move or two and add a couple pieces. I think Chicago finishes second, St. Louis third. I think GB and the Pirates finish fourth. I like what GB's doing out there. He's got a lot of good bats. J-Man left him with some cupboards that had some talent in it, and then he's just added to it, like you said. He added his boy Brisgurgis, whatever you want to call it. It was an interesting move because I didn't think his team was quite ready, and then adding $19 million to his limited payroll. I know he has a lot of cash in the bank, so maybe it won't make a big deal. It won't make a big dent. But a $19 million salary for a guy who appears to be declining a little bit seemed like a lot. So I don't know. I know that was his boy, so maybe that was just why he added him. But I think Pittsburgh finishes fourth, and then I think Theo and Cincy finish fifth. That team seems to be eroding. All of his comp guys came back, which I don't know if that's what he wanted to do. I believe he bid on a couple of them. I think he bid on Allen Rose, who wasn't real great to begin with, and now he's back. His team just seems to kind of be eroding around him. I know I touched base on a few guys, and I can echo the fact that prices were higher than I would have liked. That's not to say that they're overpriced. It's just not where I thought the value was on some of his guys. I agree there are some nice pieces there, and he might be able to flip them, but I think Cincy finishes 5th in that division.
It'll be fun to watch. I'm definitely excited to see kind of, especially the Chicago angle, because I do. Jermaine says in the chat that he thinks now is their time, and Jason knows. Jason's quite a good judge of when to go in and when to kind of hold back. So we'll definitely kind of hold and see on that one. Bringing us to the NL West. The NL West should be an interesting division this year. Just because I really still like San Francisco. I like what Cheeto's doing out there. I love that rotation. The fact that some of these young guns are starting to look quite good. Lloyd Harris, Zachary Wickens, just guys that I'm a big fans of, really starting to do what they need to be doing out there. That lineup is basically unchanged. Just, top down, pretty good lineup out there. And he's got a couple pieces. He's got a couple of young guns, young bats, maybe I should say, that once they're ready, I mean, good Lord, that's going to push them over. Alan Evans should be up there playing third base now. Jeremy Higgin is getting close to being ready. I really like his bat. Like he's got some pieces. Outside of those pieces, he's starting to wane a little bit. Not a lot left in the tank, but I really like Cheeto's team. I really think it's San Francisco's division to win this year. The one team that I would watch out for, obviously, is Arizona. Arizona looks like they were snake bit, pun intended, a little bit. But some of these players just not quite topping out where we thought they were. Lee Strauss being that guy. And that guy that was sitting at 95 peak plus for years and years, peaks out at 89. That's just some piss poor luck right there. Don't think it's going to take away from him as a player. Obviously, he's still looking to be a pretty solid player. Not as good as we were all expecting, but still pretty solid. He did get Alex Sanchez to kind of top out a lot better than probably a lot of people expected. And he's looking like a very dangerous young bat. My only concern with Alex Sanchez now is does he have that he also got a glove curse. It seems like every time we get a bat that looks like this big lefty, big power contact eye guy, that, oh my God, look, he also has a huge arm, range, and fielding. Like he'll win Gold Gloves at first base and MVPs, and he'll be the greatest all-around first baseman ever. And then they, like, 3 years later, their 82 is being traded for $1 million on the back black streets of the market. Like, I don't know why. There was a guy that LA traded or drafted, like 4th overall, that looked exactly like this. He was this big, awesome, badass looking dude, and then he just died. And I ended up buying him for $1 million, playing him one sim, and then let him die in AAA. Like, I can't remember his name. Hopefully somebody else does. But it just seems like these glovey first basemen get this bad curse. No matter how good their bats look, they just die quick. Hopefully that's not the case.
The guy from McMurdy, right? The one that Dan just drafted in LA not too long ago.
Well, that's another one, but no, this was back in that once in the early '80s. He was drafted. I'd have to look. Not too worried about it right now. Another one, Hideki Honda. That's another guy that was peaking in the 90s and peaks out at 82. Still a good-looking glove, still a good-looking bat, but just didn't quite hit where you thought he was going to hit. So I think Arizona's getting hit with a little bit of bad luck. But I like the rotation. It's not the flashiest rotation, but it's exactly what they need it to be. I like their lineup. I don't think it's enough to overcome San Francisco, but I think it's enough for second place and probably enough for the second wild card. I think in the West gets 2 playoff teams since the NL East, is not quite up to snuff after Peter. So I think in Arizona is good enough to get that second wild card. And I think Los Angeles sticks around right there. Surprised they decided not to make moves. They had announced that they were going to add and go for it. And then decided not to. So maybe the right move. I think they're more than 1 or 2 pieces short. They did pick up Roger Thompson, the highest rated type B free agent to go this year. A good outfielder that can steal some bases and has a pretty good bat. They still have Delaney, who's hitting a pretty good bat out there. They have Brandon Moffett, who's quite a good third baseman. that I really like. So they've got some pieces out there, and they've got some decent pitching as well. But I don't think they have enough. I just don't think they have enough to be better than third place in that division. I think San Diego finishes fourth just kind of by default because San Diego is just a little bit too good to finish fifth. I think that they've got some solid pieces out there. They've got some nice things in the minors. Percy's probably going to retool, rebuild a little bit, and then come back strong. So, but I think they finished fourth, and I think finish fifth out there is going to be Colorado once again. We haven't talked about Colorado in quite a while. And I think the Cat's quite fine with that because he's just kind of doing his thing and getting the second overall pick on the draft and just slowly building from the bottom back on up. But he's done it before, and I know he's going to do it again. He's got some solid bats out there. You know, he just needs to run in a couple drafts so he can get some good pitching, and he should be back on track. But I think that's the way that the West is going to go: San Francisco, Arizona, and then everybody else. So what do you got, Mike?
Yeah, I agree. I think Tito's team is definitely the team to beat out there. I think last year was kind of just a fluke with Ren and SRX hanging around as long as they did, kind of pushing Cheeto. I think San Francisco takes this running away. Ren's team is interesting. They tend to pitch in a home run haven. So definitely Strauss peaking out early and not becoming what all of us thought he was going to become hurts a little bit. I did like the ad of Vencia from Gilly for cash. I think Vencia is a decent player, especially when you acquire him for cash. Anzar is a
that was an angel saving move for Gilly too.
Yeah. I know he had to get his stadium payment ready to roll. So,
he did. He had to either pay off his stadium or go in default. So he had to sell a good player for cash, and Ren was very nice to do that. It benefited his team, and it saved Gilly from the fire. So it was great.
Yeah, and I'm going to say Bobby Arundel. He should be a better bat than he is. He just doesn't. I don't know. He's just okay in the middle of Ren's order. I guess I thought when he was coming up, he was going to be a better bat than he's kind of performed on his career. 20 home runs. You know, kind of a. I expected more out of him in that park. Again, I agree with you. Honda, right, was headed a direction thinking he'd be a top of the lineup guy, and he kind of peaked out early at 82 and. We'll see. I mean, 93 contact, 93 speed is nice. His eye is kind of lacking for on base, but his aggressiveness decent. He's going to steal you a few bags. I'll be interested to see how long he hangs at where he is, or does he kind of go the Roger Thompson route where he fades quickly? Because I think Roger Thompson was a guy that kind of, when you drafted him where you did it, opened all of our eyes like, whoa, who's this guy? And then he looked like he was going to be the top of the lineup guy, and then he just kind of pittered off rather quickly for you. And you comped him, and you got a pick out of it, which is great. Darren Foster looks like he may be Russ Burton-esque. Although I will say, Decker made out like a bandit in that deal. We all thought he was crazy for trading Darren Foster, and then he found Pierre Massadou a couple picks later, who looks like he's going to be exactly the same, if not better than Darren Foster, right? They kind of look like the same player, although Massadou has kind of aged or progressed a lot faster than Foster has. So I'll be interested to see how those two kind of mirror each other since they were traded for one another essentially in that draft. So yeah, I would go Cheeto, and then I'm going to go Oh, the second one is tough. All right, I'll go with Ren finishing second behind Cheeto, then SRX. I agree. San Diego, while rebuilding and trying to add pieces, is just still better than Colorado. Colorado, the cupboards are pretty bare when it comes to their major league team. They got a nice pieces in Depova and Emmerich up the middle for a nice second base or shortstop combo, or shortstop third base if he wants to move Emmerich. They're lacking really in their pitching specs and bullpen specs, but I mean, you know, if you got your middle infielders, you can kind of find the rest. Those seem to be the hot commodity. So we all trust that Cad's going to do what he's got to do, and that Colorado team will roll around. I know you were speaking about bad luck for Ren. That Rockies team just came on like a lion, had one run, and then just completely fell apart. So I know I felt bad for Ken, especially with Pack or whatever his MVP was, who had like one fantastic season and then just absolutely died the next year. So Colorado will finish fifth. So if I'm going through the NL, I would say it's Peter, it's J-Main, and it's Cheeto that wins the divisions. I'm going to say Jason and Ren are the wild cards. I think Ren beats Jason to face Peter. And I think Cheeto upsets J-Main and Peter beats the Diamondbacks. And then I will say Cheeto makes it to the World Series, where I didn't give my predictions in the AL, but I think G Money makes it in the Royals. And I think Cheeto wins the World Series. I think he beats G Money, and Cheeto gets his first ring. And Peter's bad luck in the playoff continues, although this time he gets out of the NLC, the NLS, whatever. He gets to the NLCS, but just doesn't quite get over the hump. So I think Cheeto takes the World Series from G Money.
Yeah, not getting swept by GD, the team that you put down every chance you possibly get, would probably be a step in the right direction for Peter. It's funny you mentioned Roger Thompson. I mean, this is a guy that's 31, and yeah, never quite peaked at where you would hope, and never quite became the player everybody thought he would. But he is quietly putting together a career that, if it plays out the way that it could, there's going to be over 2,000 hits and over 500 stolen bases on his career. So for all of that, not quite being who you thought he was going to be, he still had a good career. So even if Honda does that, 2,000 hits and 500 stolen bases, you're still happy with it. But I agree with it. Some of these guys just are getting a little bit snake bit. So in the NL, I definitely have San Francisco moving on to face Milwaukee. I have it going the other way. I have Milwaukee beating San Francisco. I think those are just two teams that are very good, and hate to see them face each other in the first round. But I think that Peter gets the benefit of having the NL East being the NL East, to give him the best record in the NL. And then he'll go on to face the winner of St. Louis and Arizona. And I do think Arizona takes it. For as much as I would love to see GD take it and then beat Peter Silly again, just because it makes for really good fought, I don't think that's the way it goes. I think that Ren overcomes and goes in the face Peter. I don't think Ren is quite enough to overcome Peter, so I think Peter wins that to go on to face Jermaine. I think he beats Jermaine this time, just barely, to go into the World Series to face G Money, where G Money beats him in the seventh game, where Lee Laughlin just gets blown up. Like Game 7 of the World Series, and Lee Laughlin gives him like 10 runs in 3 innings for the G Money to go on to win this series. So that's my prediction. Kind of similar to yours, but just a little more flair added in there for shits and giggles. But again, anything can change. We've only had one sim. A lot can change between here and there. A lot of trades can be made. People could decide to go for it. People could decide to sell. A lot of sellers out there right now, not a lot of buyers. So unless there's a big change off of that, I think that we're pretty close to hitting most of the nails on the head on this one. So anything else for the good of the order?
No, I think that's good. It's going to be a great season as always. FCM is alive and kicking, and got a lot of great GMs. So I'll be interested to see how it goes. And of course, Sim 4 opens up the fun draft time for all of us middle of the road rebuilders to get excited about.
Yep. Everybody gets excited about Sim 3. Sim 3 is exciting because you get jump season. And then and beyond that, everybody starts to get excited because then picks get redone. So, but from all of us to all of you, good night and good luck in the upcoming season. J-Main is going to fix all of this where we may have stopped.